At 5:46 a.m., Elliot Harper found a child sleeping under the vending machine. It was the kind of detail that didn't belong in a place like this. Not between the flickering fluorescent lights and the humming soda machine. Not at the start of a shift in a grocery store. The boy was small, maybe 5, curled beneath a blanket that looked too thin for winter. His head rested on a balled-up hoodie. His breath came in soft, wheezy bursts. One sneaker was missing. A stuffed lion peeked out from under his arm. Elliot didn't speak. He didn't move. Not at first. Then his eyes found her. Camilla was sitting in the far corner of the break room, arms wrapped around her knees. She didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't jump up or apologize. She just met his gaze, steady and tired. "I know," she said quietly. Elliot stepped into the room, letting the door close behind him. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. The vending machine blinked its red display. 12 Sarah. "How long has he been here?" he asked. "Since 5. Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't spoken yet that day. She glanced down at the boy, adjusted the blanket, then looked back up. "I didn't have anyone else," she added. He woke up wheezing again. "I couldn't. Leave him alone," she said it without pleading, without excuse, just the plain facts laid bare. "You know the policy," Elliot said. He hated how cold it sounded, even as the words left his mouth. Camilla nodded. No minors in employee areas, no exceptions. She repeated it like she'd already said it to herself a dozen times. "I'll clock out." She stood slowly, carefully, lifting the boy into her arms. He stirred but didn't wake, his forehead pressed against her shoulder, hot and damp. Camilla's canvas bag, faded, fraying at the edges, hung from one arm. The strap slid down, but she didn't fix it. "I wasn't trying to hide him," she said, almost as an afterthought. Elliot didn't reply. He wasn't sure what to say. He watched her walk past him, the boy cradled tightly against her chest. Neither of them looked back. Their footsteps faded into the hallway, swallowed by the hum of refrigerators and flickering lights. He remained, still for a long time. Eventually he stepped forward and sat where she'd been. The bench was still warm. On the floor nearby, something had been left behind, a sketch pad. He reached down and picked it up, flipping through the pages slowly. Crayon drawings. A crooked house. A lion. A boy holding hands with a taller figure. On one page, written in uneven block letters, "Warm Room." Elliot stared at the words. He remembered being that boy. He remembered the warmth of a break room like this one, the quiet thump of a washing machine in the background, and the way his mother used to hum while she mopped the hotel lobby. She hadn't had anywhere else to leave him either. He placed the sketch pad back on the bench, rose, walked out. In his office, he opened Camilla's employee file. The ink on her name was already fading. He tapped the keyboard, pulled up the form. Termination code 1.6, policy violation. He hit print. The paper slid out with a mechanical whine. He stared at it for a moment before reaching for his pen. There was a box for reason. He left it blank. Elliot sat at his desk staring at the printed form, employee termination request. Her name was there, third from the top in the database. Camilla Reyes. Start date, September. Attendance, perfect. Notes, none. He'd clicked through. The form like he always did. Policy violation, code 1.6. No minors on premises, no exceptions. The printer hummed, a faint mechanical sound that filled the silence like static. Elliot didn't move. Just watched the paper feed out and land on the tray with a soft flutter. He reached for it, held it in both hands. It felt heavier than it should. Camilla's file was thin. 4 months of nothing remarkable. That was the thing. She didn't stand. Out. Not for the wrong reasons, not for the right ones either. She showed up, cleaned up, clocked out, never late, never loud, never visible, really. Until this morning. Elliot glanced toward the hallway. The store hadn't opened yet. The loading crew was still in back, finishing up frozen inventory. The break room would be empty now. Quiet. He read the form again. Employee knowingly brought an unauthorized minor into a restricted area during scheduled work hours. It was accurate, every word of it, and yet it didn't feel right. He tried to remember how long it had been since he'd seen someone carry that much weight in silence. Camilla hadn't begged, Hadn't cried, just accepted. That part stayed with him. Years ago, he'd had mornings like hers. Mornings when his daughter had a fever and there was no one to watch her. Mornings when he brought her to the store, tucked her behind the produce cooler with a blanket and a comic book, hoping no one from corporate would walk through. He never got caught, or maybe he just got lucky. His eyes shifted to the photograph taped inside the top drawer. His daughter, age 7, grinning with 2 missing teeth and chocolate around her mouth. She'd drawn flowers in the margins. They were still there, faded but present. Elliot picked up his pen. He hesitated, then signed the form. Neat, steady handwriting. He slid the paper into a plain envelope, wrote her name on the front. Simple block letters, Camilla R. He placed it gently in the mailbox slot marked Final Notices. Then he sat back, hands resting in his lap. The room felt colder than before. He reached under his desk and pulled out the old space heater, plugged it in, listened as the fan kicked on and pushed warm air toward his ankles. Years ago, that sound had calmed him. Now it just reminded him how long it had been since he needed it. On the shelf nearby was a small stack of unclaimed time cards. He pulled out Camilla's. Last punch, 5:04 a.m. She hadn't even made it past her first hour. Elliot stared at the card for a long time, then placed it back. He looked again at the envelope. There was a line at the bottom of the form, optional. Comments. He hadn't filled it in. He took the envelope back out, opened it, slipped the form out again. Then with the same pen he wrote 5 quiet words in the blank space. She didn't ask for leniency. He folded the paper, returned it to the envelope, sealed it, and sat there, listening to the heater hum. The air bit harder with each step. Camilla kept one hand in her coat pocket and the other wrapped around Leon's fingers. His gloves were too thin for the wind. Her scarf was a borrowed one, left behind by a neighbor 2 apartments down. She hadn't asked to keep it, but no one came back for it either. They had been walking since just after sunrise. The first place was a diner off Fremont, with a faded now hiring sign taped to the window. She pushed the door open, guiding Leon, gently ahead of her. The warmth inside hit her skin like a false promise. Behind the counter, a woman in a red cap glanced up. Camilla smiled politely. "Hi, I saw the sign." "Positions filled," the woman said before she could finish. She didn't ask what kind of job. She didn't ask about hours. She just pulled the sign down, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash beside the register. Camilla nodded once, thanked her anyway, and stepped back out into the cold. Leon coughed. That deep, hollow kind she'd learned to track by sound alone. She stopped walking and crouched beside him, pulling the inhaler from her bag. 2 steady puffs, then a wait. His breathing eased, just a little. They moved on. A gas station, a laundromat, a corner store that smelled like bleach and tired dreams. Every place had the same answer. "Sorry, we're not hiring." Or worse, "The manager's not in today." She left her name, her number. A folded resume she'd printed at the library last week. The edges were soft from being carried too long in a second-hand purse. No one called. By noon, the clouds had thickened. The wind picked up, carrying the sting of lake air. Leon's pace slowed, his steps dragging. She offered to carry him, but he shook his head. He wanted to walk. Always wanted to walk. She admired that about him, and feared it. They ducked into a public library for warmth. Leon curled up in the children's section, pulling a book off the lowest shelf. Camilla stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the people outside pass without noticing the cold, or maybe just used to it. Her legs ached, her throat burned, and still she felt grateful for the heat of that room. 20 minutes passed before a librarian glanced over. The look wasn't unkind, just curious. Camilla nodded slightly, picked up her bag, and called Leon softly. He closed the book without protest, walked to her side, took her hand. They didn't speak until they were 3 blocks away. "Are we still trying?" he asked, voice small. She looked down at him. His cheeks were red from wind. His nose had started to run, but he was still walking. Camilla squeezed his hand. "Yes," she said. "We're still trying." They passed a coffee shop. She didn't bother going in. The baristas all wore uniforms, and there was a digital kiosk out front. She'd learned to spot places that didn't need people like her. Eventually they found a bench near the edge of a park. Camilla sat down slowly. Leon climbed up beside her, resting his head on her lap. She took off her gloves, cracked at the seams, and gently brushed a curl from his forehead. His skin was warm again. That was the worst part, not knowing if it was the weather or the illness creeping back in. She didn't cry, just leaned back, eyes closed, face tilted toward the grey sky. She had 2 more resumes in her bag, $3 and some change. 1 bus ticket left, but Leon was still breathing steadily beside her. That for now would have to be enough. The hallway smelled like dust and boiled potatoes. Camilla turned the key slowly, trying not to wake Leon. He was draped over her shoulder, heavier with exhaustion than weight. His shoes left faint wet marks on her coat. Inside the apartment the air was still, the kind of cold that settled into the walls. She set him down gently on the mattress they shared, pulled the blanket over his back, and brushed his cheek. He didn't stir. Camilla moved to the kitchen and sat. Not to eat, there wasn't anything left to cook. She just needed to be still for a moment. That's when she noticed the note. It was slipped halfway under the door, barely sticking out. Folded in half. She picked it up. Her name was written on the front in large, careful letters. Camilla. Inside. Left a little something by your door. Not charity, just soup. Loretta, next door, 2B. Camilla opened the door slowly. On the floor sat a reused plastic container, still warm to the touch. A piece of masking tape was stretched across the lid. Written in sharp black marker, chicken and rice. Real broth. Eat it hot, no smiley face, no get well soon. Just instructions, like a prescription. She carried it to the counter and found a pan. Her hands moved without thinking. Add water, stir, heat low. The smell came first, rich, honest. She didn't wake Leon. She didn't take a picture. She just sat on the floor and ate from the pot, 1 spoon at a time, no seasoning packets. No aftertaste of aluminum, just soup. Halfway through she paused. She'd seen Loretta before, the woman in the lavender housecoat who never left the building without lipstick. Hair always tied back tight, face like stone. No words wasted. Last month, Camilla helped her carry groceries when the elevator broke. Didn't think anything of it. Now there was soup and a note. That night, Camilla wrote a reply on the back of a receipt. Thank you. I didn't know how much I needed this. She didn't sign it, just folded it twice and slid it under Loretta's door at 2B. Then she went back to the mattress, curled up beside Leon. His breathing was slower now, less wheezy. In the dark, she closed her eyes, not to sleep, just to rest against the silence. Somewhere, behind the thin apartment walls, a heater clanked to life. And for the first time in days, Camilla didn't feel completely alone. Elliot always turned on her light. It wasn't a conscious thing anymore, just muscle memory, like locking the door or kicking off his boots. Each evening, as he passed the second bedroom, his hand would reach for the switch. Click, the bulb buzzed. A low hum, barely audible, filled the hallway. A warm yellow glow spilled onto the carpet. Inside, everything stayed exactly where she'd left it. A twin bed with a worn quilt. A desk covered in stickers that peeled at the corners. The old corkboard still held up a faded Best Science Project ribbon from 4th grade. She hadn't lived here in over 2 years. Elliot didn't move anything, didn't touch the desk or pick up the loose sock by the nightstand. He just stood in the doorway, staring at the shape of absence. Sometimes he'd tell himself it was temporary, that she'd walk through the door again one day, laughing, smelling like rain and library books. Sometimes he believed it. Tonight, he didn't. He stepped inside. The floor creaked under his weight. He reached for the lamp on the desk, then stopped. One light was enough. His fingers grazed the edge of the dresser. Dust clung to the corners. He wiped it absently, not to clean, just to feel something. The surface was cold. There were books stacked on the windowsill. Old ones, mostly fantasy. Dragons, castles, girls who climbed towers without help. She used to read them out loud when she couldn't sleep. He remembered lying on the couch, listening to her voice trail off mid-sentence, the book slipping from her hands. He never finished those stories, still didn't know how most of them ended. The window rattled softly. Outside, the wind pushed dry leaves against the siding. He leaned forward slightly and pulled the curtain aside. The porch light still worked. It blinked sometimes, but it was always on, for her. In case Elliot sat on the edge of the bed, it sank under his weight. Springs groaned softly. He hadn't sat here in months. He looked down at his hands, rough, clean, still holding the ghost of the envelope he'd handed over that morning. Camilla. He kept seeing her eyes, the way she didn't argue. How she cradled the boy, not protectively, but like it was the only way she knew how to stay upright. She reminded him of someone. Not a face, but a feeling. It had been a long time since anything did. The heater clicked on, and the room warmed slightly. He leaned back, palms on the quilt, fingers spread. It smelled like dust and something faintly floral. Still her scent somehow, after all this time. He closed his eyes. He didn't cry. He never cried. Not when his daughter moved out. Not when his ex-wife told him she was getting remarried. Not when the house grew quieter than he could manage. But he did sit there for a long time, letting the silence press into him. Outside, a siren passed. Then quiet again. Elliot opened his eyes, looked around the room one last time, then he stood, walked to the doorway and reached for the switch. His hand paused. He left the light on, just like always. The building looked colder in daylight. Camilla stood on the sidewalk across the street from Moonlight Storage, arms wrapped tight around herself, eyes fixed on the loading bay doors. Her boots, still wet from the slush 2 blocks back, left pale imprints on the concrete. Leon was asleep on her back, bundled in her coat with the scarf tucked under his chin. His body pressed close to hers, like an extra heartbeat. She hadn't planned to come back. After Elliot fired her, she told herself it was over. Pride said, find another way. But the job boards were empty, and so was the fridge. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. Leon had finished the last cup of soup. Camilla looked down at the manila folder in her hand. Inside, one resume barely holding itself together with a bent paperclip, and a letter she wrote at the library that morning. No appeal, just a question. Is the night shift still open? She crossed the street. The air smelled like salt and metal, the way all storage places do. The buzzer at the main office was chipped. She pressed it and waited. Elena opened the door. For a moment the woman said nothing, just stared. Then she stepped aside without comment. Camilla slipped past her and into the familiar chill of the entryway. The same beige tile, the same flickering bulb above the vending machine, and down the hallway that same hum. Elena took the folder without asking what was inside. He's in his office, she said quietly. Camilla nodded. She walked slow. Each step a memory. The floor still creaked outside Unit 11. Someone had spilled coffee and never cleaned it. She remembered that too. Elliot's door was cracked. He didn't look up when she knocked gently, just gestured toward the chair across from him and kept his eyes on a printed invoice. Camilla stepped in, stood instead of sitting, and placed the folder on his desk. I don't expect anything, she said. Her voice didn't shake. I just need work. I can take night shifts, I can clean, whatever's needed. Elliot didn't speak. He flipped the folder open, looked at the paper for exactly 1 second, closed it again. The silence stretched. Camilla held her breath. Leon stirred slightly, murmured something against her shoulder. Finally, Elliot nodded once. You start Monday, he said. 8 p.m. sharp. Nothing more. Camilla blinked. No questions. No apologies, no eye contact. But something in the way he said it, flat but not cold, made her think he'd already made the decision before she even knocked. Thank you, she said. Elliot didn't answer. She turned to go, then paused at the door. There's a little storage room at the back near the break area. If it's not in use, could I leave him there while I work? She didn't ask it as a favor. More like a logistical note. Elliot finally looked up. His eyes were tired, but not hard. He nodded, and that was it. No handshake, no rules spelled out. Just two people, in a cold office, both pretending it was all simple. Outside, as Camilla stepped back into the wind, the clouds broke for just a second. A pale ribbon of sunlight stretched across the sidewalk. Leon shifted on her back, awake now. "Are we going home?" he asked. She didn't smile, but her voice was steady. "No," she said, "we're going forward." The storage break room was barely the size of a closet, no windows. One flickering light overhead. The floor was concrete, stained in corners by years of forgotten spills. A dented mini-fridge buzzed in the corner, louder than necessary. Camilla pulled the folding chair into the corner where the walls met. It scraped against the floor, sharp in the silence. She set Leon down beside her, easing his coat off. His cheeks were pink from the cold, nose slightly runny, but he didn't complain. "This is our table," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "Right here." Leon looked around. "Where's the food?" Camilla reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. It was old, once a dish towel, now soft and frayed at the edges. She'd borrowed a red marker from the front desk earlier and spent part of her break drawing on it. Forks, spoons, two lopsided plates, a slice of something that looked vaguely like pizza, a mug with steam squiggles. Leon stared, then grinned. "You drew spaghetti," he said. "I did." Camilla smoothed the cloth on the floor like a proper tablecloth. "And hot chocolate and a little cake." Leon leaned in, finger tracing the crooked swirls she'd drawn as frosting. "I want this piece. You got it." They sat cross-legged on the floor, pretending. Camilla reached into the backpack again and brought out the one thing she had, a half piece of bread from her own dinner break. She tore it in two, gave him the bigger half. Leon ate it slowly as if it was something more. "What's your superhero's name again?" she asked. He wiped crumbs from his lip. "Captain Freezerburn." "Of course. He doesn't fly, but he can turn invisible in cold places." "That sounds useful." Leon nodded solemnly. "He watches people who are sad, and he brings them hot soup in their dreams." Camilla looked down at the red marker lines. Her fingers still smelled faintly of ink. Across from her, her son smiled over an invisible cup of cocoa. She'd wanted to give him a better night than this. She wanted warm sheets, books before bed, a floor that wasn't made of cement. But tonight all she had was a fake tablecloth and the quiet bravery of pretending. She leaned back against the wall. Her back ached from mopping. Her hands were cracked again. But this moment, right here, right now, was whole, and that felt like something. Leon yawned. "Ready for your bed?" she whispered. He nodded and crawled toward the sleeping bag she'd set up in the corner with an old storage blanket beneath it. The break room door was slightly ajar, just enough for light to spill in, not enough for the cold to creep through. Camilla folded the towel slowly, careful not to smudge the marker. She tucked it into her backpack like something worth keeping. Then she sat beside Leon and watched him fall asleep, not from exhaustion or fever this time, but the normal kind, the good kind. She let herself breathe. In the hallway, Elliot passed by on his final round. He saw the glow under the break room door. He heard nothing, no voices, no footsteps, just a faint laugh earlier. A child's, clear and real. He didn't open the door. He didn't need to. Elliot didn't know why he paused at the end of the hallway. It was almost midnight. Most of the building had settled into that strange, humming silence unique to warehouse floors after hours. Even the heater seemed to take slower breaths. But from behind the break room door he heard laughter. Not loud, not the kind that demands attention, but soft, crisp. A child's laugh, followed by a whisper too muffled to catch. He didn't move at first, just stood there, holding a clipboard he'd already forgotten how to read. His feet rooted to the cold floor. Something old and tight in his chest stirred like a locked drawer that hadn't been opened in years. He leaned slightly. The door was cracked, maybe 2 fingers wide. Enough to see through without being noticed. Inside, Camilla was kneeling on the floor, a blanket draped between 2 chairs to form a makeshift tent. Her son, Leon, peeked out from under it, face glowing with that kind of joy Elliot had almost forgotten children could still have. The mother made a silly noise, not exaggerated, just enough to make the boy giggle again, clutching his chest as if trying to hold the laughter in. Then she crawled into the blanket fort with him, holding a flashlight. The beam flickered against the wall, creating shadows, moving shapes. Elliot realized they were doing shadow puppets. One of them, a rabbit maybe, leapt across the ceiling, caught in the beam of yellow light. Another looked like a bird with wings made of fingers. The boy made a sound, half gasp, half cheer. Camilla shushed him, mock serious. "We're in stealth mode, remember," she whispered. Leon covered his mouth. Elliot couldn't look away, and, for the first time in a long time, the memory returned without warning. He was 6 again, hidden under the counter of a cleaning closet in a hotel downtown. His mother had placed 2 towels on the floor, folded one into a pillow. The other she used to make a puppet, a face drawn on with eyeliner, 2 mismatched buttons stitched into the cloth. He remembered the squeak of the bottle carts rolling past, the way his mother had hummed, soft and low as she scrubbed the floor nearby, the sound of bleach, of loneliness, of someone trying to keep things quiet so the child could pretend it was normal. She had made him laugh then, just once. Something silly about the puppet being scared of mops, and in that laugh he forgot, for just a moment, that he was supposed to feel ashamed. Now, standing outside the break room, Elliot's hand clenched tighter around the clipboard. Camilla was doing the same thing, hiding the cracks, filling the silence with light, refusing to let her son feel how close they were to breaking. And Leon, he wasn't worried about the cold, or the time, or how little they had. He was just a boy, playing, in a fort his mother made out of nothing. Elliot exhaled, a slow, shaky breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He backed away from the door without a sound, didn't interrupt, didn't speak, just walked down the hallway, eyes fixed on the ground, and set the clipboard on the first flat surface he found. He rubbed his temples and sat at his desk in the dark. No lamp, no words, only the echo of laughter bouncing off steel walls, and something deep inside him whispering, "You've seen this before, and you didn't help then." Camilla arrived, early that night. The wind outside clawed at the warehouse lot, slapping at her coat sleeves as she pulled the door shut behind her. She held a half-full thermos of ginger tea, not because she needed the drink, but because the warmth against her fingers was the only comfort she could carry. The halls echoed. A loose strip of insulation flapped somewhere overhead. She made her way down the corridor toward the freezer room, her steps slower than usual. As she opened the door, something stopped her. It wasn't the cold, at least, not the usual kind. The air inside didn't bite. It didn't chase her breath. Into clouds, there was a warmth, faint, like a hand offered without words. She stepped inside, eyes narrowing slightly. There, tucked in the corner near the crate rack, was a small ceramic space heater, old but clean, plugged in. Its red indicator light glowed steady. A soft whirring filled the silence. No note, no instructions, no name. Just the heater, humming like it belonged. And a moment from earlier, unremarkable at the time, drifted back to her, Elliot, at the end of the hall. Standing with his hands in his jacket pockets, watching, not speaking, just that one slow nod. She hadn't returned it. She hadn't known how. Camilla walked over and crouched beside the heater, its warmth wrapped around her knees and calves, gentle, not overpowering, like someone being careful, like someone who remembered what it was like to be cold and unnoticed. She ran a gloved finger along the edge of the unit. It wasn't dusty. Someone had cleaned it before bringing it here. She didn't need to ask who. From her tote, she pulled out the usual bundle, a folded drawing cloth, 2 worn paperbacks, and Leon's wool scarf. She checked the outlet, making sure the cord didn't trail where he could trip. It was still early. Leon would arrive after her first shift, as always. But tonight, for once, he wouldn't be trembling. His hands wouldn't turn pink trying to clutch a crayon. He could rest, truly rest. Camilla sat on the upturned crate, placed the thermos on the shelf. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't scoff either. She just listened to the soft hum of the heater filling the room like a breath held, then finally released. An hour later, Elliot passed the room again. He didn't slow down, didn't look. But Camilla for the first time gave a nod. Not large, not obvious, just enough. And from the corner of her eye she caught the shift in his face. Not a smile, but something just slightly less guarded. He kept walking, that was fine. Camilla leaned back against the crate, folding her arms to her chest. She didn't trust him. Not fully. Not yet. But this was something. It wasn't a speech or an apology. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a space heater in a freezer room, and that somehow meant more. Elliot wasn't supposed to be in the break room. He told himself he was just passing through, checking the supply cabinet, logging a late night delivery that never arrived. But when he saw the edge of the crayon peeking from under the heater cord, he stopped. On the floor, next to a taped-up drawing, sat a plastic cup of crayons. One of them, nearly worn down to the paper, had rolled away, reddish-brown, soft and dull with a tip like it had been used again and again. Elliot bent to pick it up. He hesitated halfway down. He didn't touch it. Instead, his eyes moved to the wall. A new piece of paper had been taped just above the heater, slightly crooked. On it, a child had drawn a table, a simple rectangle, covered in a red-brown cloth. A bowl sat in the middle, steaming. 2 chairs faced each other. Underneath, in shaky block letters, "Dinner with Mama. Leon." The red-brown was unmistakable. That color didn't come from just anywhere. It wasn't the typical red, not even brick. It was specific. Elliot hadn't seen it in years, but the moment struck hard, like opening an old trunk and being hit by the smell of home. His mother used to set that exact color on the table every Sunday night. Not a store-bought tablecloth, just a faded piece of flannel she stitched from scraps, deep reddish-brown, with frayed edges and uneven stitching. They didn't have much, but every Sunday she'd clear the table, lay that cloth down and set out 2 chipped bowls of stew. One for him, one for her. He hadn't thought of it in a decade, not until tonight. Elliot leaned against the doorframe and looked at the drawing. The child's lines were uneven but deliberate, like someone who didn't have much paper and couldn't afford to waste a sheet. There was something about the way the chairs faced each other. Close, not quite touching, as if they were leaning in. The little steam lines coming out of the bowl, 3 of them, looping gently into the air. And that color, that quiet, unwavering color. Elliot didn't move for a while. The hallway buzzed softly behind him, but in the room, it was just the hum of the space heater and the memory pressing itself into his chest. He stepped back slowly, careful not to make a sound. As he passed the staff lockers, he reached for the clipboard hanging on the end hook, scanned the names, found C. Ortega written in blue pen. Next to it, Shift B, part-time, no benefits, no insurance, no childcare support. Elliot ran a thumb across the side of the clipboard, then let it fall back. He didn't know what he would do yet, but he knew something had shifted. In his office that night, Elliot sat with the lights off. Just the street lamp through the window, casting lines across his desk. On the far corner was an old receipt. And for the first time in months he remembered the flannel tucked in a drawer at home, deep red-brown, washed thin with time. He reached into the desk, pulled open the drawer, and stared at the space inside. Empty. But maybe not. For long. Loretta poured hot water into 2 chipped mugs. One of them still had a faded sticker of a snowman on the side. It was spring, but in this part of town the chill lingered like an old song no one could turn off. Camilla sat on the worn couch, her legs tucked under her, blanket draped across her knees. Leon was asleep in the next room. His cough had faded, for now, but the way his chest rose and fell still made her watch every breath. "You look like someone who hasn't exhaled in 3 days, Loretta said, handing her a mug. Camilla gave a tired smile. "I don't think I have." Loretta eased into the recliner with a quiet grunt. Her bathrobe was frayed at the cuffs, and one sock didn't match the other. But her voice had weight. The kind of voice that came from staying up too many nights for too many years and still getting up the next morning. "You know," she began, wrapping both hands around her cup, "I used to take night shifts too, back when my youngest had that breathing thing. Same wheeze your boy gets. I cleaned buses back then, public ones. You learn a lot about people when you're wiping their gum off seatbacks at 2 in the morning. Camilla listened without interrupting. There was a lady named Angie who worked the route before me. She left me a note once in the glove box, said she'd hidden a pack of crackers in the dash in case I forgot dinner again. Loretta smiled faintly. Never met her. Still remember her name. She took a slow sip. Most folks don't know. How many women hold up the night? We clean, we stitch, we clock in when no one sees. Then we show up in the morning with breakfast like we didn't just spend 8 hours making sure the world stays clean for people who'll never say thank you. Camilla looked down at her tea. The warmth didn't quite reach her fingers. You're doing fine, Nina, Loretta said gently. Even if it doesn't feel like it. Camilla's throat tightened. She hadn't cried in front of anyone in months, but something about Loretta's voice, its steady kindness, its lack of pity, made her eyes burn. I don't know if I can keep this up, she whispered. You don't have to, Loretta said, leaning forward. You just have to keep going. The radiator clicked in the corner. Outside, a siren passed in the distance, fading like a memory. Loretta continued, her voice lower now. There's no medal for this work, no applause. Sometimes the best thing you get is that your kid wakes up one morning and says, I'm not coughing anymore. That's your standing ovation. Camilla let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. I used to think the only thing I had to give my children was my strength, Loretta added. But what saved us? It was never my strength. It was the people who gave me 5 minutes of theirs when I had none left. She reached over and gently tapped Camilla's knee. You're not alone unless you choose to be. Later that night, after the tea was cold and the words had settled between them like soft dust, Camilla sat beside Leon's bed and brushed the hair from his forehead. He stirred slightly, murmured something in his sleep, and curled deeper under the blanket. For the first time in days, her shoulders lowered, not because anything had gotten easier, but because someone had reminded her this weight wasn't hers to carry alone. The first time it happened, she thought it was a mistake. A small box of crayons sat on the folding table where Leon usually colored, fresh, unused, still in the plastic. Rap! Camilla stood in the middle of the break room, blinking at it like it might vanish if she moved too fast. She glanced around. No one was there. The cleaning crew hadn't clocked in yet. Elliot's office light was off. She touched the box, gently then turned it over. No note. Just a simple label. 12 colors, including that same reddish-brown Leon had nearly worn down. When Leon arrived after her first half-shift, he saw them and gasped. Mama! They're new! He didn't ask where they came from. He didn't need. So she let him open the pack and line them up like treasures, color by color, tallest to shortest. He started sketching without hesitation. A new superhero, he said. This one wore gloves and worked in a warehouse and could breathe fire, but only to warm people up. That night, Camilla wiped down the sinks with a bit more patience than usual. Second time, it was a sandwich, wrapped in paper resting beside the crayons. Peanut butter and banana, cut diagonally, the way children liked. Camilla stared at it for a long moment before unwrapping it. The bread was fresh, not cafeteria leftovers. Someone made this, someone who knew how to tuck the edges of the wrap so the corners stayed soft. She hesitated before letting Leon take a bite. Then she saw the note, written on the paper, barely visible. No nuts, no mayo, just fruit and bread. Camilla folded the wrapper carefully and tucked it into her bag. She didn't say anything to Elliot the next time he passed her in the hallway, but she noticed the way his eyes flicked to her son, then away. The way his shoulders eased just slightly when he saw Leon coloring, not coughing. The third time it was a pair of mittens, tiny, fleece-lined, stitched by hand. They weren't new, they were repaired, thumb seams reinforced with care. One had a faint coffee stain on the palm, like someone had dropped them on a work break and kept wearing them anyway. Leon's fingers slipped into them perfectly. He lifted his hands, wiggling his fingers in mock surprise. They're so soft, Mama. Camilla swallowed the lump in her throat. Each item came at night, never more than one, never with a name. Just small gestures laid gently on the fold-out table, like offerings from someone who didn't want to be seen. only understood. By the fourth gift, a coloring book filled with blank cityscapes, Camilla stopped wondering who. She knew. She just didn't know why. And she didn't dare ask. Not yet. At the end of her shift, Camilla packed the crayons, the half-finished sandwich and Leon's mittens into her bag. She moved slowly, as if each item needed to be handled with care, not because they were expensive, but because they were deliberate. As she turned off the lights in the break room, her eyes landed on the table once more. The chair was slightly askew. The crayons had been neatly realigned, and in the corner of the table, near the lamp, sat a folded napkin, drawn on it in faint pen, a lion with a scarf and a crown, Leon's symbol. But she hadn't drawn it. She picked it up with both hands. In the quiet warmth of the break room, Camilla finally allowed herself a small smile. She didn't need grand gestures. She just needed these. Leon was unusually quiet that afternoon, not the sleepy kind of quiet or the kind that meant he wasn't feeling well. This was different, focused, intentional. He sat at the little table in the break room, tongue peeking out in concentration as he pressed a crayon to paper, slowly dragging the color across the fold. His boots were off, his tiny socked feet curled. Under the chair, Camilla finished wiping the glass door and peeked in. "What are you working on, mi amor?" Leon didn't look up. "It's a surprise." That was all he said. It wasn't until their shift ended that he showed her. The paper was folded like a card, edges uneven. On the front was a big, wonky drawing, a man in a puffy coat holding an umbrella over a little boy. There was a lion by their feet, its tail shaped like a heart. Inside, Leon had written in big block letters with 2 colors, "Thank you for the crayons and the sandwich and for not being loud." Camilla pressed her hand to her mouth. The words were crooked. The I spelling wasn't perfect, but the message came through with painful clarity. "Are you giving this to?" she asked gently. Leon nodded. "To the man who always looks tired but smiles anyway. Elliot." Camilla knelt beside her son and touched the edge of the card with 2 fingers. "Why now?" Leon shrugged. "Because I feel warm here now, like maybe we're not strangers." She looked at him, startled by the simplicity of his answer, then nodded. "Okay, we'll give it to him." She waited until Elliot passed by the break room later that evening, clipboard in hand. He was mid-step when Leon darted out, holding the card in both hands like it might tear if he let it go. "Wait, mister." Elliot stopped. Leon extended the card upward, silent now, eyes wide. "This is for you," he said. Elliot looked down at the card. His hand didn't move right away. Then slowly he took it. He opened it, read it, and for a moment, Camilla thought he wasn't going to react at all. Then he knelt, right there, on the cold concrete floor. "You made this?" he asked softly. Leon nodded. Elliot's voice was quiet. "You're very kind," Leon beamed. "Mama says kindness is a kind of superpower." Elliot glanced at Camilla. Something flickered in his expression, something neither of them had words for. Not pity, not discomfort, just stillness. "And then," Elliot said, "this is the best thing I've received all year." He didn't add anything dramatic, he didn't make a speech. He just stood again, tucked the card carefully into his coat pocket, and nodded once to Camilla. "Thank you," he said, not to Leon this time, but to her. That night, long after the cleaning was done and the lights were off, Camilla walked past his office. She didn't mean to look in, but she did. And there it was, the card, propped open on his desk, facing him like a small unspoken anchor. In a world full of noise, Leon had offered quiet gratitude. And for the first time, Camilla let herself hope. Maybe what they were building here wasn't just survival anymore. Maybe it was something closer to home. Elliot stood in the back corridor of the warehouse, a mug of black coffee cooling in his hands. He wasn't drinking it. He hadn't even intended to walk this far, but his legs had a way of carrying him here lately, past the offices, past the loading dock, and toward the break room where the mother and son always seemed to leave warmth behind. He paused at the corner just far enough to hear without intruding. Leon was laughing, full and light the way only children do when they forget the weight on their parents' shoulders. Then came Camilla's voice, soft and animated. Tonight's soup is carrot ginger. Very fancy, but only for superheroes with clean hands. Leon giggled again. Elliot closed his eyes. That line, it wasn't the exact words, but the tone, the rhythm. It pulled something from him, a sound, a smell, a memory so old he hadn't touched it in years. He was 5, maybe 6. Back then, the freezer room wasn't just cold, it was survival. His mother worked nights at a grocery store chain, cleaning the aisles after closing. She wasn't supposed to bring him, but babysitters cost more than she made in a shift. So she'd stash him behind pallets of canned goods in the back cooler. She called it the magic fort. She wrapped him in her jacket, slid a milk crate under him, gave him a plastic spoon and an empty styrofoam cup. What are we having tonight? He remembered asking through chattering teeth. She knelt beside him and whispered, "Minestrone, but shh, it's invisible. Only special kids can taste it." She made slurping sounds, blew into the empty cup. He'd copied her. They'd laughed, and for a minute the freezer wasn't so cold. Elliot opened his eyes. The warehouse was still. His coffee had gone lukewarm. He rubbed his fingers along the rim of the mug, the ceramic suddenly too smooth, too silent. He hadn't thought about that. Night in years, hadn't wanted to. The last time he saw his mother, she'd been wiping down shelves, hands cracked from bleach. She told him she'd come back after her next shift. She never did. They said she slipped on a spill behind the deli. No one found her for hours. No jacket, no fort, no goodbye. He exhaled slowly. Down the hallway, the laughter had quieted. Camilla was humming now, something in Spanish, low and lilting. Elliot took a step closer but didn't enter the room. There, through the narrow glass window, he saw them. Camilla sat on the floor beside Leon. They had a towel spread out like a picnic. Blanket. On top were 2 napkins folded like placemats, a plastic spoon between them, and a paper cup. Leon slurped loudly and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Camilla played along, offering him more soup. Elliot's throat tightened. He didn't belong in that room, not yet, maybe not ever, but he understood it. That pretend meal. That mother who gave everything without saying so. He turned away, back down the corridor. His fingers still gripped the mug, now useless, now heavy. When he reached his office, he set it down and pulled open the drawer where he kept old receipts and extra pens. He found a paper napkin, folded it into a triangle. He didn't know why he did it. He just did. He reached. For a pen on the napkin, he drew a small steaming bowl. 2 spoons, one big, one small. He didn't sign it, didn't have to. He folded it once, then again, and set it aside. Tomorrow he'd leave it on their table. No words, just memory, shared in silence. The shift had ended an hour ago. Most of the warehouse was dark, save for the soft light humming in the break room. Camilla lingered by the sink, rinsing Leon's thermos. Her hands moved automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. Leon had coughed through most of the evening, not constantly, just enough to make her chest tighten with every wheeze. He was asleep, now curled under his coat on the small break-room couch. One hand clutched a napkin, another one of Elliot's strange little drawings had appeared again. This one had 2 stick figures huddled under a blanket, a scribbled sun rising behind them. She hadn't said anything when she saw it. Not to Leon, not to Elliot. What would she even say? Thank you for noticing. The hallway creaked. She looked up. He was standing by the door, one hand on the frame, the other in the pocket of his jacket. The light from the vending machine behind him cast a faint blue glow over his shoulders. They hadn't spoken, really spoken, since the day he fired. Camilla turned back to the sink, but not before she saw his eyes flick to the couch. To Leon, to the napkin. "Is he all right?" Elliot asked. His voice was low, not cold, just unsure. "He's tired," she said, "and the air's been dry. Makes the coughing worse." Elliot nodded slowly. "He needs a better place to sleep." The words hung there heavy but not accusatory. Camilla turned off the faucet. She dried her hands, then faced him. "I know." He didn't move. She didn't either. For the first time, neither of them pretended not to see the full picture. No more silent nods. No more polite distance. Just two people standing in the same flickering light, with too many things unsaid between them. He reminds me of someone, Elliot said after a long pause. Camilla tilted her head. Your daughter? He blinked, caught off guard. No, he said softly. Me. That was all. Just that one sentence. But it cracked something open. Camilla didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it settle. Let the honesty breathe. You don't have to leave food or crayons, you know, she said gently. He doesn't expect it. Elliot shifted his weight, looking at the floor. I know. But maybe I need to. Camilla's throat tightened. They stood there like that, two shadows under buzzing lights. Then Elliot took a step forward, not closer to her, just closer to the truth. I'm not good at saying things the right way, he admitted. But I see what you do every night and it matters. Camilla inhaled slow and steady, then gave the smallest nod. That's all I needed to know. She didn't thank him, didn't smile, but her shoulders lowered a little, and when she looked at him again, her gaze didn't flinch. For the first time, they saw each other clearly, not as boss and employee, not as burdens, just as two tired souls trying not to fall apart, and maybe, just maybe, ready to stop pretending they were strangers. Leon had never been inside the staff break room when it looked like this. There were balloons, not many, just 3. One red, one yellow, one with a faded cartoon lemon on it. They bobbed gently, taped to the vending machine with what looked like leftover shipping tape. There were snacks too. Someone had cut up fruit. There were cookies, the good kind, with the little sugar crystals on top. And in the middle of it all, on the folding table where Leon usually sat drawing, was something that stopped him in his tracks. His drawings. No, not just taped on the wall this time, spread across the table, smoothed out and weighted down at the corners, was his paper tablecloth, the one he and Mama had doodled on with borrowed crayons during her shifts. The lions, the trees, the funny faces with crooked teeth, it had started out as a joke, something to make the long evenings feel less cold, but now it was the centerpiece of a party. Leon looked up. Elliot was standing by the sink, stirring something in a pitcher. Lemonade, maybe. His tie was crooked. His hair stuck up on one side. He looked nervous. Camilla stood near the doorway, her hands still in her coat pockets. She hadn't said anything yet. Leon took a step forward. You used it, he whispered. Elliot turned. Yeah, he said, trying not to smile too wide. I hope that's okay. I thought it made the room better. Leon walked up to the table, his fingers running gently over the crayon lines. You didn't throw it away? Of course not. Leon looked at his mum. Mama, it's our table. Camilla's lips parted. She hadn't expected this. Her eyes drifted over the drawings, the cookies, the awkward decorations. She looked at Elliot. What's all this? He shrugged. A thank you for the night shift, for showing up when it's hard, for making this place feel less empty. Camilla said nothing for a moment, then stepped forward and took off her coat, folding it over the chair. She reached into her bag and pulled out 2 plastic cups. We have juice, she said. We can add to the table. Leon's smile stretched wider. It wasn't a real party, not the kind he saw on TV, but it felt warmer than most of his birthdays. He sat down and grabbed a cookie, carefully picking one from the tray that didn't touch the others. Just like Mama taught him, Elliot poured lemonade into a cup and slid it toward him. To your art, he said. Leon beamed. To the table. Camilla raised her cup too. To the people who see more than just messes. Elliot's eyes flicked to her. She held his gaze. There was something different in the air now. Not loud, not heavy, just soft. Like a thank you that didn't need to be said. After the cookies were half eaten and the balloons had drooped a little, Elliot sat down across from Leon. You ever think of making a real comic book? He asked, gesturing at the lions and capes and clouds on the paper. Leon nodded slowly. I already started. Yeah? He's a lion who fights sadness, Leon explained, but not with punching, with hugs And soup. Elliot chuckled. That's a good kind of superhero. Leon looked at him carefully. You ever draw when you were little? Elliot blinked. I did. A long time ago. Leon tilted his head. Why'd you stop? Elliot looked at Camilla, then at the table. Maybe I forgot it mattered. Leon nodded, solemnly the way only kids could when they decided something important. You can draw with me tomorrow. I'll share the red crayon. Elliot smiled. Not the tired kind. Not the polite kind, a real one. He reached over, broke a cookie in half and held it out. To the lion who fights sadness, he said. Leon took the piece with both hands, and in that small, fluorescent-lit break room, surrounded by drawings, crumbs, and unspoken healing, a family was forming. Not by blood, but by choice, by crayons, by quiet acts of seeing each other. Camilla hadn't expected the chair. She had walked into the break room to clock out. Leon was still packing up his crayons into a reused sandwich bag. The party remnants were mostly cleared, the paper tablecloth folded neatly and tucked under Leon's arm like treasure. Elliot was standing near the counter, pouring hot water into 2 mismatched mugs. He didn't look at her right away, didn't say anything either, but he slid one of the mugs to the edge of the table, then gestured without fanfare at the empty chair across from him. Have a seat, he said simply. Camilla hesitated, not because she didn't want to, but because the offer felt heavier than it sounded. It wasn't about tea or exhaustion, or even the leftover warmth of the little celebration they'd just shared. It was about space. A chair offered not to a worker, not to a problem to manage, but to a person. Camilla lowered herself slowly, her palms flat against the edge of the table. Her eyes flicked to Leon, who gave her a small, knowing nod before zipping up his coat. He took his juice and wandered toward the window, leaving the 2 adults in silence. She wrapped her fingers around the mug. Chamomile, from the scent. A quiet moment passed before Elliot finally spoke. I used to think there were rules to all. This, she glanced at him, to what? This place, work, boundaries. He tapped the table. Keep it clean, keep it cold, don't get involved. Camilla didn't interrupt. I followed them for years, he went on. Maybe I thought if I stayed inside the lines, nothing else would fall apart. She looked at him now, not with suspicion or distance, but with something gentler, familiar, like watching someone try to unlearn their armor. You lost someone, she said, not as a question. Elliot exhaled, slow. I did. He didn't say her name. Didn't need to. Camilla sipped her tea, then said, I don't think the rules are bad, but I think sometimes we follow them because we're scared to feel too much. Their eyes met. It wasn't romantic, wasn't dramatic. It was quiet recognition. Silent nod across 2 cups of tea, a moment of sitting down, not just in a chair, but in truth. Elliot tilted his head slightly. I wasn't sure you'd still be here. I wasn't sure you'd let me back, he gave a small smile. I'm still figuring out how to do this right. So am I, she said. They didn't toast, didn't shake hands. But both drank slowly. Both stayed seated even when the tea cooled. Outside, Leon drew circles in the condensation on the window. Inside, something shifted, not loudly, not all at once, but enough. A chair, a cup, a conversation, and for the first time, the beginning of something that neither of them needed to explain. Camilla didn't notice the envelope at first. She had clocked in like always, hair tied back, hands still cold from the walk in. Leon had fallen asleep on the bus again. His sketchbook rested in her bag, soft edges curled from overuse. She opened her locker to grab her gloves and stopped. Inside, tucked neatly on the top shelf, was a small box wrapped in butcher paper. No ribbon. No name, just a folded note beneath it, handwritten on lined notepad paper. Her name was at the top, nothing else. She looked around. The hallway was empty. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, same as ever. Camilla pulled the box out slowly, her breath catching. The paper had been folded with care. Inside was a brand new pack of colored pencils, every shade imaginable sharpened to perfect points. Nestled underneath it was a square of clean white cotton cloth, a tablecloth, blank, unmarked. waiting. She ran her hand gently. Over it, and beneath it, a third item, a small tin box, the kind that once held cookies, now repurposed. Inside were scraps of folded paper, each one with a scribbled animal or shape, sketches she knew by heart. Leon's. They'd been saved. All of them. Camilla's fingers shook as she unfolded the note. It wasn't long, for the colors not yet drawn. For the tables worth setting. For the people who make cold places warm, I see you. That was all. She sat on the bench in front of her locker and held the box to her chest. It wasn't a raise. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was something more honest. A man who didn't speak much, saying everything in the way he knew how, with paper, with color, with silence that felt full instead of empty. Camilla looked down at the fresh tablecloth. She could already see it in her mind. Leon's lions, Elliot's clumsy birds, her own shy trees with roots that reached too deep. She smiled. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she was starting over. She felt like she was continuing. Something worth keeping. The frame was heavier than he expected. Simple wood, dark stain. Glass thick enough to reflect the overhead lights, but soft enough not to distract from what it held. The tablecloth, washed, pressed, covered in drawings, it hung now in the small upstairs meeting room, one nobody really used except for storage and the occasional awkward staff check-in. But Elliot had asked to have the space cleared. No one questioned him. It was Camilla's idea to frame it. She hadn't said much, just held the fabric in both hands and asked, "Do you think it should stay folded away?" He said no. So now it lived here, on the wall, a gallery of small crooked things, a green lion with two short legs, a mug of soup, steam curling into heart shapes, a stick figure holding hands with a taller one under an umbrella, scribbled stars, an unfinished tree in the corner. A crescent moon in red. Elliot looked at it often, not out of pride, out of memory. 1 year ago, this room had been silent. Now it hummed with something gentle. Camilla's coat still hung behind the door most evenings, even after her shift ended. Leon's latest drawings had made their way onto the bulletin board in the break room. One of them, a superhero with oversized gloves and a mop, was labeled Captain Clean. Elliot didn't ask who it was meant to be. He didn't have to. That evening, just before closing, Camilla walked in holding 2 mugs. No ceremony. She handed one to him and leaned against the doorframe. "I saw you up here," she said. "Thought you'd forgotten dinner." Elliot smirked. "Didn't forget, just postponed." They stood side by side, sipping tea. The room was quiet except for the hum of the building settling into night. Leon had a school concert that weekend. Camilla had mentioned it twice, once casually, once with a smile that asked if Elliot might come. He hadn't answered yet, but he'd already cleared his schedule. Camilla gestured toward the framed tablecloth. "It's funny," she said. "We never meant for that thing to last." "No," Elliot said, his voice soft. "But it did." She tilted her head, studying one of the drawings, 2 birds mid-flight, their wings just barely touching. Then she added, as if thinking aloud, "Some things aren't meant to be wiped clean." He looked at her. She wasn't crying. Neither was he, but something in the air felt full. Camilla set her mug down and stepped closer to the frame. She reached up, brushing a thumb against the glass, over the small lion. "Leon says he wants to add more to it someday," she said. Elliot nodded. "Let him." She turned, eyes steady. "You'd be okay with that?" He gave a half shrug. "It's his table now, too." They stood there a moment longer. 2 people changed not by miracles, but by slow acts of choosing to stay, to see, to try again. Camilla reached for the light switch. As she turned it off, the room dimmed, and the glass caught the last golden streak of the hallway light. The drawings glowed, just a little, just enough. On the bottom of the frame, Elliot had carved a small brass plate. It read, "Some tables aren't for eating, some are for holding. What we thought we lost." He'd written the words one night when he couldn't sleep. He hadn't told Camilla yet, but as they stepped out into the hall, the light fading behind them, he thought maybe she already understood.